name's Catherine and I'm a senior lecturer in psychology at Bournemouth University, and I'm going to be talking about something that's a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about some of our work on how carers support social media usage among people with dementia. It's funded by the British Academy, and although I'm presenting this today, we have got a really great team. One team member, Dr Donellen, who wants to give us a wave, is part of that team in helping us to make sense of this data. So let's make a start. So we know that dementia has a really powerful impact on those affected. So for people with dementia themselves, they report heightened feelings of social isolation, loneliness, a shrinking social world, and loss or changes in identity. And for carers, we know that they have higher elevated rates of mental and physical illness compared to the general population, and higher levels of social isolation and financial distress as well. So in response to these challenges, dementia has been named as a priority in health and social care planning. And in particular, there's been an emphasis placed on timely diagnosis, but also provision of support throughout the disease trajectory. So that's right from the beginning, right through to the end. And this is where technological innovations do hold some potential by facilitating social connection, by facilitating cognitive stimulation, and also access to those from outside their immediate networks. And in particular, social media has recently garnered interest by researchers. So who here uses some form of social media? Hands up? Yeah? Okay, right, so this sea of hands just shows how ingrained social media is within society, actually. And research in terms of dementia is a bit slow to catch up in this area. So as I say, there's a few of us conducting research in this space, and we found that people with early stage dementia are using a wide range of social media platforms, including online forums such as the Alzheimer Society's online forum, Twitter, Facebook. They're blogging about their experiences as well. But what's missing from this research is the experiences of unpaid carers. And these unpaid carers, they might have unique concerns about people with dementia being active online. They may act as gatekeepers to social media spaces. It's also likely that they might be supporting usage of social media as well, given that social media can be cognitively and physically demanding to use. And so that was what we were interested in exploring in our research. And while we know that there is other research on carers' experiences of supporting general digital technology usage, as of yet there hadn't been anything that had focused specifically on social media. And so that was what led us to this research question, where we're looking at what are unpaid carers' experiences of supporting people with dementia in their use of social media. So to answer this question, we recruited 234 unpaid carers, and these were recruited via research participation networks such as Join Dementia Research, which was a fantastic resource, the Young Dementia Network, Prolific, social media, so yeah, lots of recruitment avenues. And just to say as well that what I'm presenting today is focusing specifically on those who supported someone who used social media. Got a lot more data to analyse, so watch this space on that. And these participants, they were directed towards an online survey, and this online survey asked them about, what does this support actually look like? How do you help them to use social media? What challenges are there? And what are your motivations for it as well? We're also quite interested in how things have changed over time, so particularly as dementia has progressed. How does the support change? And also, do they have any plans for the future? What's going to happen to this profile? Do they have access to usernames? Do they have access to profiles? And what do they think their future support needs will be? And also, we asked about whether they needed any training or whether they thought training would actually be useful. So, what I found quite interesting, of the 234 unpaid carers that we recruited, 55 of them reported caring for someone who uses social media. So that's around 23%. And I was quite surprised by that number, actually. I thought it would be a lot less. The carers, they had an average age of around 45, and most of them provided emotional or practical support, so suggesting that the person they care for, their dementia is not that advanced. The people with dementia had an average age of 75, and actually we had quite a wide range of their ages, so we saw it going right from 57 to someone who was 91 using it. Perhaps unsurprisingly, we found that the most commonly used platform was Facebook. And when we asked them about training and resources, we actually found that quite a lot of carers were interested in accessing training and resources on how to use social media and how to use it safely and effectively, but they didn't know where to look for this. So that sets us up quite nicely for future research. But let's have a look at these key findings. So when we looked at the qualitative data, we produced these 4 themes. And what these 4 themes highlight is that carers really did see the value in social media for people with dementia, and they were using it in quite innovative ways, which I'll look into in a moment. However, they were concerned about the vulnerability of people with dementia when they were in these online spaces. And so what they did was they carefully managed their online experiences. And this was a really careful balancing act, actually, where they needed to balance the perceived benefits with the person with dementia's safety and security. They wanted to maintain their autonomy and their independence, but also felt that there was this need to protect them as well. So this first theme is all about how carers helped people with dementia to navigate social media. And in practice, this included helping them with a wide range of tasks. So for example, they'd help them set up a social media profile, they would help them post status updates, they'd help them find friends on social media, find hobbies and interests. And also a common thing that came up was helping them to purchase things through Facebook Marketplace, which was a surprise. And it's also important to note that, as I'm sure you're probably thinking, this helping them in this way, it wasn't just a one-time occurrence. It was something that was ongoing. And the carers told us that very often the person they were caring for would forget how to do certain activities on social media. And so they were required to go and provide technical assistance again. And one key issue as well that was commonly reported across the sample was that people with dementia would forget their passwords, or they'd forget their usernames, and they'd become locked out of their accounts. So actually, carers spent quite a lot of time unlocking accounts, having to set them back up on social media. Another issue as well was when platforms were updated. So, when things are changed, when buttons are moved, actually people with dementia found this really difficult. And so carers were on hand to talk them through the updated interfaces and to help them to relearn how to use it. But this second theme is more about the carers' motivations for supporting social media usage. So as I mentioned earlier, carers actually felt that social media was a really valuable resource for the person they cared for. They felt that it helped them to fulfill parts of their caring role as a facilitator of social connections and as a facilitator of cognitive stimulation. So in particular, they reported using Facebook to connect people with dementia to their family members, so they could feel like they were still somewhat involved in, say, their grandchildren or their children's lives who they perhaps didn't see as often or who had moved away. Another important point was that carers felt a responsibility to keep the people they cared for connected to their local community, and so they used social media to support this need. So in particular, Facebook community groups, such as village Facebook groups, I don't know if any of you are members of those, they would help people with dementia connect to those groups. And on there, they'd see photographs from quite a while ago that would jog memories, or it just created the sense of belonging within their local community and access to local information. Quite creatively as well, we noticed that carers were using social media as a way of cognitive stimulation. So actually having conversations on social media, following these hobbies and these interests, they felt was cognitively stimulating for the person with dementia. And the carers who spoke to us were also using it as a way for reminiscence. So some carers, they would sit there with the person with dementia on the iPad, and they'd look at photos that were on social media, and they'd actually use these as a tool to stimulate memories and to stimulate discussion and to foster positive well-being. However, it wasn't all positive. So, as I'm sure you're probably all thinking as well, there were risks involved. And carers, we really were aware of the vulnerability of people with dementia when they were in these online spaces. So, in particular, carers, they were worried about people with dementia's vulnerability to online scammers. So perhaps clicking on a malicious link by accident, or by posting some very personal details by accident, such as financial information. And some people were also afraid of romance scams as well online. Misinformation did come up quite a lot as well, and this seemed to be quite a big issue for carers. They said that sometimes the person they cared for, they would be quite susceptible to believing this and wouldn't necessarily be critical of this information online. And this would create difficulties after, because the person with dementia would become quite confused or about what was going on and quite frustrated. And so because of these risks, carers were taking a very active role in managing the person with dementia's social media experiences. And this sometimes involved doing things like occasionally logging into the profile to check that nothing was awry, authorising friends' requests, for example, if they'd seen a post that perhaps didn't necessarily reflect what the person with dementia wanted to say, or if they meant to send it to a person directly rather than posting on their wall, they would sometimes go and delete those posts. Or they'd employ very strict privacy settings as well to make sure only really close family members could be connected to that person. And importantly, it seems like a lot of this role, a lot of this weight is falling upon carers. And so what carers in our study did was they urged social media companies that actually they have a responsibility. They need to be looking after their users. And they put forward some technological suggestions that could be valuable in the future. And just finally, as I'm sure you're probably thinking as well, this involved substantial work for the carers, in addition to the work that they're already doing as well outside of social media. And actually, it involved considerable time, involved some considerable energy, and it also required considerable patience as well. And what we noticed was that this support in social media usage, it tended to follow a clear trajectory, where first of all, carers, they would occasionally provide technical support. But over time, as dementia progressed, this became a lot more intensive. It involved more work. And some carers eventually even ended up taking over the social media profile and pretending to be the person with dementia and posting on their behalf, which was quite interesting to see. And all of this work involved in this, it did take an emotional toll. It took an emotional toll on the person with dementia, who would become frustrated or upset when they couldn't do activities that they could previously do independently. And it took a toll on the carer as well, who found it quite frustrating sometimes when the person with dementia couldn't do tasks that were quite intuitive to them. So it really was quite difficult, and there was a sense that actually this is just another thing that they have to do in addition to everything else. So what does this mean? Well, what we found is that a significant number of carers are supporting people with dementia to use social media. And this is something that is going to become more of a thing, so we really need to get ahead of it. And they're helping them in a variety of ways and are really recognising the importance of social media. And this comes at a time where we're seeing increasing digitalisation of dementia care, as Tosis said in her wonderful talk earlier. And as I said, it's something that we really need to get ahead of. So what we need to focus on now is that actually stakeholders need to work together to co-produce solutions that can support people with dementia and their carers. That's not to say that digital technologies and social media are a great solution and will fix everything. Of course, I'm not suggesting that. The carers in our study had clear challenges. However, what I advocate for is that online spaces, like social media spaces, they should be accessible, they should be inclusive of people with dementia and their carers so that they can benefit from them if they choose to, or if they're interested in it. And so that's why we really need to work towards making these spaces more accessible, more safe, and more inclusive. And also, this work, it comes at a time where there's debates around the online safety bill. And a lot of those discussions tend to focus on children and young people. But actually, with an ageing population, we're going to see the number of people with dementia using social media increase. And so social media companies need to focus on developing effective solutions that prioritise the safety of older adults. And also, just to say as well that a lot of the participants did express a need for training or an interest in training. So actually what we need to do as well in future is focus on co-producing some educational initiatives that help people with dementia and their carers to use social media safely and effectively. So just to sum up, our findings shed light on the complexities of caring in the digital age. It seems that social media can be a really valuable source for people with dementia, but they are potentially vulnerable and there's a lot of work involved in supporting usage. So what we need to do is we need to work with stakeholders, including technology designers, people with dementia, carers, support organisations and policymakers. We need to come together to think about how can we improve things, how can we make these environments safer and more inclusive, because this is only something that's going to get bigger. So thank you very much for listening to me. I do have a survey where we're looking to hear from support service providers. So if that is you, please feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you very much. Thank you.